Thank you, band. Thank you, tech team, up there in the crow's nest for 4 services, barely able to go to the bathroom. We love you. We bought boxes of Depends for them, so they'll be all right. Good morning. Welcome to New Hope Church. Not a very friendly crowd, are you? I thought I was with friends. How do you know that you're not in a cult? Some crackpot church that you're part of. Well, 1 Timothy gives us a blueprint for a gospel-focused church. And this morning we're in 1 Timothy chapter 3. I'm very excited about this talk, and I hope you'll be excited too. It's a part 1 of a 2-part series on chapter 3. So we'll get into it. Let me start reading at verse 1. The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of an overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, and with all dignity keep his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he might not fall into disgrace, into the snare of the devil. Now, spoiler alert, we won't be getting past verse 1 this morning, but we'll go through the rest of them next week. This saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, that's one Greek word, office of overseer, he desires a noble task. And many of you this morning are going, I have no desire to be an elder in a church. I'm off the hook. I don't have to listen or pay attention. Wrong. You're not off the hook. Christian, you need to grow up. Every Christian needs to read this list as goals for their character and their skill development. There aren't 2 kind of acceptable levels of Christian maturity. The spiritually mature and the ding-dong Christian over here. And I know Christians who've been Christians forever. And it seems like they've settled into some mediocre level of immaturity. I'm not all holy like the pastor or an elder. I'm just a regular Christian. Like there's an acceptable discipleship impaired level of followers of Jesus. Don't settle for being a baby Christian. Eternal souls are waiting for you to grow up and get in the game and join Jesus in seeking and saving those dear people who are lost. Every Christian needs to read this list as goals for their character and their skill development. Now, not everyone should be an overseer. Too many leaders, too many cooks ruin the soup. You know that verse. You can Google it. It's in the Old Testament somewhere, I'm sure. But everyone should aspire to be eligible in their character, and I think mostly in skills as well. So let's talk about the office. I thought rather than preaching, I'd just show you an episode. Ah, good. Gamer service here for the office. That's awesome. The word overseer is used interchangeably with pastor or elder or bishop. And here in chapter 3, Paul tells us what kind of leaders are up to such a task. Paul doesn't tell Timothy how to govern. Monthly board meetings, Robert's Rules of Orders, nomination committees, 2/3 majority vote, membership meetings, town hall meetings, AGM meetings. You should incorporate. You should file for nonprofit charitable status, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't say any of that. What Paul does say in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 40, let all things be done decently and in order. So for 2,000 years, churches have been finding ways that work best for them in their time and their place to behave decently and in order. Sadly, I think most churches are more concerned about doing things decently and in order than they are at proclaiming the good news to lost sons and daughters. Never let church polity stop you from proclaiming the good news of Jesus, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. There are lots of ways that churches and groups of churches, normally we call those denominations, can work. Pope Francis is the head of the Catholic Church, the Bishop of Rome, the sovereign of the Vatican City State. Then there are denominationally led churches. I always think of the Salvation Army when I think of them. Salvation Army, they move pastors around from church to church every 2 years. I think it's maybe 5 years now. I couldn't imagine being part of that, but it works for them. Some churches are congregationally led. Anybody been part of that? The congregation gets to vote on everything, including the color of the paint in the nursery. Those are fun meetings. When I was an associate pastor in a congregationally led church, I remember thinking, you can't hold a pastor accountable for the life and health and vitality of the church and not give them the power and the responsibilities to make the church healthy and vibrant. Our church kept firing the pastor who wasn't doing a good enough job, but they also kept micromanaging the job he was doing. And my thinking was, if you want me to produce results, let me lead. Resource me, or don't hire a leader, hire a chaplain. There's nothing wrong with hiring a chaplain. Many churches are led by chaplain-type people, so long as everyone understands what's expected of them. You might guess that I'm personally not a chaplain-type person. Many churches these days are elder-led churches. Elders are elected to serve a term. They govern the church. These days, most of those churches are sort of set up as a governance model where the pastor is like the CEO. So the board sets the policy and measurable goals and doesn't interfere with the day-to-day operation. That's the pastor's job. And I've served on a number of those boards. And then there are some churches that are pastor-led churches. These churches can be really weird. Pastor goes up into a mountain, prays and fasts for a week, and comes down with a vision. Brothers and sisters, I have a vision, and here's what we're going to do now. And the whole church says, okay, and he often leads them, and they all try and catch up. Or he goes to a new conference and has a new idea, and he comes back and tells you about his new idea, and we're leading there and going there. Now, personally, I did have a vision just a few weeks ago. I had a vision that we need a new ministry jet. Well, the ashtrays are full on the old one. You people need to laugh a little bit better at my jokes. I'm working hard. This is a forced service I'm working at here. But the truth is, all of these models can work. And they can all stink, or they could flourish. Some of you, like I, have moved from a congregationally led church to an elder-led church, and now you're here in a pastor-led church. Now, Paul doesn't say too much about what elders oversee. He gives us a picture in Acts chapter 20, verse 17. Let me read it for you. He says, now from Miletus, Paul sent to the Ephesus, called the elders of the church to come to him. And the apostle encouraged the Ephesian elders to, verse 28, to pay careful attention to yourselves and to all the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, to shepherd and care for the church of God, which he obtained with his own blood. Here in verse 28, Paul uses the same form of these terms, elders, overseers, and shepherds, all interchangeably. Elders are to pay close attention to themselves and to the flock, to shepherd and care for the church. Now, there are a lot of right ways to do things. In 1 Timothy, we see Paul leading this group of churches rather autocratically. He simply appoints Timothy to lead the churches in Ephesus. We see that in chapter 1, verse 3. There was some false teaching, and it needed to be corrected authoritatively. In Acts chapter 6, we see an interplay between church leadership and the people. It's a beautiful thing, really. There's a complaint that arises in the early church from the Greek-speaking minority against the Hebrew majority, because in verse 1 it says their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution of food. Well, the 12 apostles don't just grab the bull by the horns and solve the problem. Instead, they summon all the disciples together, it says in verse 2, and they say to the congregation, you choose. Pick out from among you. In verse 3, the apostles guide the process. Choose 7 men of good repute, full of the Holy Spirit and of wisdom, and we will appoint this duty to them. To whom we will appoint this duty. The 12 then are committed. They say, we are going to stay focused in prayer and the ministry of the word. And in verse 5, it says, the whole gathering rallied around the leaders and their initiative and their guidance, and it said it pleased the whole gathering. Then the people chose the 7 and brought them to the apostles for their blessing. Verse 6 says, they set before the apostles, and they prayed and laid their hands on them. So it's a glimpse of a healthy dynamic of a local church, where the leaders don't presume obedience, but rather persuade the people from their heart. And the people, they aren't just willing, but they're eager to be persuaded by their pastors. There's a dynamic of persuading and obeying. Well, there's lots of right ways to do things. The key is to have righteous people in leadership. Well, let's talk about New Hope Church's leaders and how we pay careful attention to ourselves, to the flock, to shepherd and care for the church of God. First, a little history. The Mennonite Brethren licensed me in 1987 to be a pastor and later ordained me. They didn't really have a theology about ordination, so I borrowed Dr. Eugene Peterson's lashed to the mast concept. It's a great article. You can Google it. Like the captain on a sailing ship, he is lashed to the mast in the midst of a storm to go down with the ship. The last one there. Tom Brown was ordained for life in 1998. When I lost a hostile takeover power struggle from my associate pastors in the church I planted, my question was, God, do you still have a role for me to play in your kingdom? Some friends began to meet on Sunday mornings in our living room. I had this little thought of hope. If you can build a church by loving people and loving Jesus, well, let's give it a go, because that's all I got. The denomination counseled against us planting New Hope Church. They said, you guys are too hurt. You'll plant a nasty, bitter church. Better, Tom, for you to go sell cars. Well, I understood what they were saying, but I had made my vow to preach for life to God and not to them. So a little teaching moment here for us all. Friends, you need to know something about Jesus' Great Commission. In Matthew 28, Jesus gathers his disciples and he says to them, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. We get to do some baptisms this morning. Teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely I am with you till the end of the earth. Baptize them, immerse them in the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ, the gospel purchased for us by his work on the cross. Baptize them into that, immerse them in that. Friends, you don't need anyone else to commission you, to give you permission to use the gifts that God has given you to make disciples. Now, don't be foolish and don't be arrogant and be a jerk about it. Just humbly do what you hear Jesus calling you to do. I had to spend my severance package keeping my vow. And we also vowed to be forgiving of those who'd kicked us out, and then to be unified with the broader church, because isn't that Jesus' prayer in John 17? So we met in my living room, and then in a barn, and then in a school. We worshiped, preached the word, held each other accountable, and reached out to lost sons and daughters. Simple. Very simple. How many of you saw the Jesus Revolution movie? Oh, you should see it. It's great. It's the hippie church there, right? Beautiful thing. I read an article from compellingtruth.org about the organic church. I'll read some. The organic church, or the simple church, aims to pare down Christian fellowship down to the most basic natural activities in response to some modern church models that institute a wide variety of programs, build extensive buildings, hire professional staff from South Africa, and work on a business-like model dependent upon huge budgets. Yuck, who'd want to be part of a church like that? I'll read some more. Christians who endeavor the organic church base their philosophy on Acts chapter 2 with individuals or families in small groups, helping each other with spiritual growth, Bible study, ministry work, and comfort. Some, such as those described in the organicchurch.org, say they want to avoid man-made religious systems along with the baggage that comes with the current Christian church models. Okay, cool, awesome. So you have a little organic group meeting in your living room, and then in a barn or a public school. But then more people come. And then more people come. And then y'all come. And we got New Hope Church. Well, shortly after we started, the denomination asked us to partner with them, and we did. We knew that we didn't want to be a congregationally led church, because been there, done that. We didn't like the way our elders had gone rogue in our previous church. New Hope Church started with 3 families. I was the pastor that led it. Pastor-led church. Simple. Remember that when it comes to church governance, we should know that there are a lot of right ways to do things with the right people. There are not a lot of ways to be right. Note the distinction. God decides what's right or wrong. Lots of churches and denominations keep changing their governance models, but what they really need to change is the quality of people they have leading. Here in 1 Timothy chapter 3, Paul is teaching Timothy who the right people are. And we'll go through them all next week. So how do New Hope church leaders pay attention to themselves and to the flock to shepherd and care for the church? Perhaps one of the best things that we do is the accountability that comes from our concentric circles of decision making. While we're a pastor-led church, we have trustees who can fire our lead pastor over immorality or heresy. They also set his compensation and that of any of his relatives. And the trustees are also elders. Some of our trustees have been partnering with me in ministry for over 40 years, and some are new. The next circle out is our pastoral staff. As you can imagine, much of what gets generated in our church comes from our pastoral staff. They are also elders. Elders advise the lead pastor, they advise the staff. Trustees are elders, pastoral staff are elders, other people are elders. Elders meet as needed, and every elder must be significantly engaged in ministry at New Hope Church. They don't sit in an ivory tower telling everybody what to do. This is the team that meets to evaluate if our sermons are hitting the mark, or what our kingdom legacy goals might be, or what kind of partnerships we should have outside our church. The next concentric circle of decision-making is what we call our breakfast club. They meet on the first Wednesday of the month at 7 a.m. That's how you know if they really love Jesus. Some zoom in, they don't love Jesus that much. And thanks to Marcus, our breakfasts have been getting a lot better, so it's worth the drive in. But here's where all the life group leaders are invited. That's 70 life groups. All the ministry leaders are invited to come, to hear what's going on, to prayerfully consider what's happening, and then to give feedback. I want to encourage you, don't wonder about, I wonder what about this or about that about New Hope Church. I wonder what's going on. I wonder how that. Don't wonder. Ask your life group leader. Ask your ministry leader. We're more than happy to update everybody about everything. Got nothing to hide, happy to what God's doing all the way around. You need to shorten your time frame from when you consider jumping in full all in at New Hope Church. Because you need a church and a church needs you. So don't wonder, ask, and we'll be more than happy to. You fill out a Connect card today, someone will contact you. Now, occasionally we do have like a congregational vote. It's like, when we did our Kingdom Legacy Initiative, we did the vision briefings, and then people handed in their pledge. They pledged for the 4 Ps, and they pledged with their money. It's a good way to get a temperature on how everybody's doing. Now, let me just turn the tables a little bit and ask you, what layers of accountability do you have in your life? Who holds you accountable? Or are you just rogue out there doing your own thing? Because if you do, you'll be a lame duck Christian. You need to build accountability into your life, and we can help you with that. Well, one question people ask is, who holds Tom accountable? Well, the trustees hold me accountable. Well, who holds the trustees accountable? I like this question because it's kind of an interesting one. It kind of assumes that if I were to say, well, the denomination does, then people go, okay, good. But there's a huge assumption with that, because the denomination is run by a board of 10, 12 people, and that board is run by 3 people, the CEO and the president and the vice president. And so you don't know these people at all. But if I say the denomination, you go, oh, okay. But you don't know them. But you can know all the leaders here at New Hope Church. You can have coffee with any one of them at any time. These are people who've been serving for like 40 years. You can know them. But we do think that it would be good to have an outside voice into our church. So we've established what we call an A team, the apostolic team. And we've asked some people, leaders across North America, from Niagara, from Ottawa, from BC, from Texas and California. You come and speak to us about anything at any time. Ask us whatever questions we want, and we're going to go to you and ask you for wisdom. And that's turning out to be a good thing. It's not complete yet, but it's well in process. So how do New Hope leaders prayerfully pay careful attention to ourselves and to the flock and to shepherd and care for the church? Well, one other thing. Once a month, all the leaders of New Hope Church are invited to Leaders Pub. It's on the third Monday of the night. Leaders Pub, because at about 8 o'clock, we stop and have pub snacks. Because y'all work like dogs making this church happen. We want to say a little bit of a thank you to you. But we spend 2 hours working on skills and character. Just what it talks about in 1 Timothy chapter 3. We're developing our skills and character to be better Christians and consequently to be better leaders.